My name is Gary Hirshberg. I'm a humble organic yogurt maker. We guarantee multiple organisms with every bite. More importantly, I'm an alum entering class of 72. I have had the pleasure and honor of spending time on podiums with my old friend Al Gore often in the past, but it is a special pleasure to be introducing him here at Hampshire, where my formal climate change education began 40 years ago this fall. 40 years ago this fall, I arrived on campus a confused 17-year-old with a heart full of troubles and a head full of ideas about what was happening to my home in rural New Hampshire and to our planet. Mountaintop views I had known as a younger child, for instance, the sight of the Atlantic Ocean from the summit of Mount Washington, on certain clear days had become obscured. No one has reported seeing the ocean from that mountain since I was a boy. We now know that that view was obscured because New Hampshire is downwind from all of America's sources of air pollution, from Midwestern coal burning to automobile emissions from up and down the seaboard, aided and abetted by higher levels of humidity and airborne particulates associated with a warming climate. Now, I had watched the rapid disappearance of area farms from which my family had received our eggs, our chickens, our holiday lambs and hams, our fruits and our milk. I had learned that 1 million family farmers had disappeared in my then short lifetime. Those personal and visceral anecdotes, combined with news of rivers catching on fire, toxic waste dumps, chemical spills, and DDT, led me to see business as the cause of all this pollution. So I arrived at Hampshire wanting to get as far from business as I possibly could. I then wandered into courses with Ray Coppinger and John Reed and Ray Bradley over at UMass, and learned then what we know now, that human activities are fundamentally and perhaps irreversibly changing the planet forever. Over the ensuing years here, I learned then that our climate problems are actually only symptoms of a deeper human and ecological crisis. That science only explained part of the problem, that our problems were philosophical, that the planet is not, in fact, a subsidiary of our economies, that, in fact, we had it backwards. All commerce had been made possible by a bountiful earth, and yet we act as if the planet is there for the taking and there for the dumping, that it's ours somehow. We've forgotten that we are a part of the planet, that our problems were economic. We had built an entire modern economic system on myths like waste, and that mythological place called away, where we send our waste. I still have not figured out where that is. And externalities, the direct consequences of our economic choices, such as climate change, or a national obesity or cancer epidemic. And yet, because these genuine externalities, these genuine results of our economic choices do not appear on our balance sheets or our P&Ls, because they don't exist there, they actually don't exist in economic terms. That our problems were sociologic, that material value had become a higher priority than fairness, compassion, kindness, empathy, justice. In short, I was receiving a classic Hampshire education, a multidisciplinary, integrated odyssey into the ecology of economics, in which all aspects of our relationships to each other and our planet are, of course, interconnected. And through my Division 3, which I'm sure you've all read, on dendrochronologic and climatologic investigation into the causes of alpine treeline, I learned something even more important. I learned here how to learn. And I learned that I actually had the capacity to delve into and take on complex problems. And with this hard-won confidence, I left Hampshire to focus on climate solutions, to advance strategies which are now on the front burners of some of the world's leading corporations. And with my partner Samuel Kamen, we formed Stonyfield to prove that reducing climate footprint, as well as water footprints and toxic footprints, actually are highly profitable activities. We had a wonderful business in those early years. The only problem was we had no supply and no demand. But bolstered by my Hampshire-esque confidence, we rallied on. Subsequently, we've proven over 29 years. We've addressed, for example, reducing our carbon footprint over the last 6 years has generated $25 million right to our bottom line. Actual financial direct results from reducing carbon footprint. Today, from our 7 cows back in the old days. We support 1,800 organic family farmers with an average herd size of 82 cows on several million chemical-free acres, sequestering carbon and demonstrating that win-win-win-win-win economics in agriculture is not only possible, but even more productive with higher yields and better economics than conventional chemical agriculture. We have proved that organics will be critical parts of the solutions to the climate crisis, that organic is going to become the norm. It's not a question of whether, but when, and that we as consumers have the power to expedite evolution through the marketplace. I've learned that the climate and the family farm crises will require the same solutions, not just in how we act, but actually in how we think. For instance, while many people like we are obsessed with recycling as a critical part of our ecological responsibility, in a true ecological future, when you finish eating the yogurt, you will eat the cup. And that is coming very soon. In short, we brought the classic Hampshire College approach of asking why not, and indeed have discovered and proved an entirely new way of doing commerce. Stonyfield is a direct product of the Hampshire education. Now, speaking of things thinking differently, before we hear from Al, I want to say a word about Jonathan. In his short time here, he has already vindicated the trustees' selection as the perfect president for Hampshire's next phase. Without stealing Jonathan's moment, I will simply say that he has, with the same sense of urgency we all feel about the planetary crisis, put forward a classic Hampshire vision for a bold, unprecedented, multidisciplinary leap into the 21st century that will make Hampshire a leader in innovation in food, health, and sustainability. Jonathan understands that we are not going to slow down and conserve our way to solving the global climate, water, and toxins crises, that we actually need to engage in the business of restoration. Now, my wife, Meg, and I are so impressed and convinced of the uniqueness of this vision, this man, and the capabilities of this college to rise once again to the challenges of focusing not on the problems that led us here, but on the pathways for how we as a society can reverse our way out of this ecological cul-de-sac, that we are proud to make a $1 million lead gift to get this ball rolling. This is for Jonathan. Now, the check is in the mail. Now, let's just put this bluntly. What goes around comes around. My education here put me on a path that has been profitable for many, including me, and now I am proud to plow back some nutrients and fertility into Hampshire's 21st century soils. Now, I am very, very happy to be able to introduce my old and longtime friend Al Gore to help inaugurate Jonathan and Hampshire's new era. I know you understand that no one has done more to focus Americans on climate change than Al. And I also don't need to tell you that he has shown that our political process is uniquely ill-suited to lead on an issue of such import. But in introducing this American and global hero as our keynote speaker, I want to remind us of one critical aspect of his story that has received far less attention, study, and understanding than merited. Al has taught us a lesson that may be more important than any single scientific or economic argument he put forth. And as I remind us of this lesson at some risk, because I know the painful memories for all of us, but perhaps our special guest. Perhaps the most damaging, immoral, and wrong decision in the history of the U.S. Supreme Court, the Citizens United decision, has enabled corporations to make unlimited and undisclosed contributions. As a CEO, I know corporations are not people too, okay? But they haven't put me on the court yet, what can I say? But in a 5-4 vote that pumped gasoline on the fire of an already dysfunctional system of financing elections, to the point that we no longer have elections in this country, we have sales. Now, we must remember We must remember that this decision was shaped on Election Day 2000, for it was Al's opponent, George W. Bush, who subsequently placed the 2 swing votes on the court that validated Citizens United. We all remember that election because of the Supreme Court's decision about Florida and dangling Chad. But I want to remind you that in my state of New Hampshire, Al lost 4 precious electoral votes by 11,711 votes. And in New Hampshire, by the way, Ralph Nader won 22,000 votes that same election. If Ralph Nader, in championing civil, consumer, and environmental rights, had stepped aside, and/or if half the votes that went to him instead went to candidate Gore, the final Electoral College tally that year would have been Bush 267 and Gore 270. We would not have had Citizens United validated. Now, the lesson for a wonderfully idealistic place like Hampshire is that in a democracy, we can never, ever forget that every single vote counts. But more, we need to remember that while we promote our ideals, we must remain rooted in the real world. Ralph Nader has been a heroic foot soldier in the battle for justice for decades. But this was not his time, and the consequences of his failure to see the bigger picture will be with us for a generation. Now, I was proud and privileged to be one of Hampshire's early guinea pigs. Jonathan's predecessors were correct in knowing that knowing is not enough. Al knows this too. While we must be data-driven and evidence-based, we need wisdom, humility, peripheral vision, imagination, and a new way of systemic thinking. But just as it was true 40 years ago, it is more true today that we need to quickly advance this new way of thinking. We do not have another 40 years now. Our college's new president understands this better than most, and that is why I am grateful that he has brought his vision and wisdom to a place that can now be ground zero for new integrative approaches that combine ecology and economics. And I am grateful to you too, Al, for coming here to help launch Hampshire's new era. You represent all that is wonderful about our country, the wisdom to see over the horizon, to frame a new worldview, and the courage and boldness and determination to take the next hill. Please join me in welcoming Al Gore.